Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre has announced that if elected Prime Minister, he would cut the industrial carbon tax. New Prime Minister Mark Carney cut the consumer carbon tax last week, and the CBC's Karina Roman was watching Poilievre's announcement and joins me now live from Ottawa. So Karina, take us through what Poilievre wants to do.
So he was at a podium today that said axe the tax, and it's been a while since he's been behind a podium that says axe the tax. I just want to point that out. He had pivoted to a Canada First podium, but it's new days and new ways of communicating now that we're dealing with a Trump administration and the threat of tariffs and annexation. So in terms of the carbon tax, as you mentioned, the new Prime Minister and Liberal government has stopped the continuation of the consumer carbon price. Poilievre wants to go one further. He wants to not only cut the industrial price on pollution, which is the cost to businesses and industry and steel manufacturing and factories who emit greenhouse gases. He wants to get rid of this because he says it is also adding cost to consumers. And to remove it would be to lower the cost to consumers and prices and make life more affordable. But he also said it would help with Canada's competitiveness against the U.S. in cutting this tax. But, of course, then he faced questions of what doing so would mean for Canada's emission targets and what his target would be if he was Prime Minister. Poilievre said that he's all about using technology to protect the environment, not taxes. And he explained how he would approach an emission target. Have a listen.
What would my emissions target look like? I treat this as a global problem. By bringing home production from more polluting foreign jurisdictions, we reduce global emissions while growing our own paychecks. I don't think it is an achievement to shut down a Canadian steel mill and then see one open up in China that produces 10 or 20 times more emissions for each unit of steel. We need to do is acknowledge that the best way to reduce emissions is to bring home clean production here.
So he didn't give a number that he would aspire to as Prime Minister for the country, talking about how Canada could be a global player in bringing down emissions. In terms of the industrial pricing system, Mark Carney has said he wants to make big polluters pay, but it's not clear whether that would continue under the current system. And the Justice Minister was on Toronto radio this morning, also being asked about this, and said that there are many ways to do this, that perhaps the current industrial pricing system is not necessarily the way that they would do it, but that this will all be revealed in the coming weeks, which we have a strong suspicion, Andrew, will be an election campaign when we find out more details about this. But the Justice Minister did say that in terms of the legislation that governs carbon pricing, that if re-elected, a Liberal government would repeal that legislation, and which is something that it goes beyond the order in council that was signed that ended it over the weekend. And that's something to push back against Pierre Poilievre, who accuses the Liberal government of planning to bring the carbon tax back.
And I understand that Poilievre had some words for Trump.
He did, and this goes back to what I said about the pivoting message. Yes, this time he was actually standing behind an axe the tax podium, not a Canada First podium, but he was at a steel mill in Quebec, one that has already announced layoffs, mostly due to the imposition of U.S. tariffs on steel. So he was at Iveco Rolling Mills in Quebec, and behind him were steel workers who are employed there. And he talked about how some of them probably have already received layoff notices and others fear it. And so that led him to say this to Donald Trump. Have a listen.
And I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people? These are great Canadian people. American workers, just like them, are going to lose jobs if this continuing trade war insanity goes on. There is no good reason to do this to these good people. Stop the tariffs, stop the chaos, let's solve this problem, and that will mean that workers on both sides of the border can get their lives back, and both the nations can be stronger, safer, and more secure.
Now, he said those comments not in response to any question from journalists, but that was part of his opening remarks, which shows a new reality as we head into a potential election season, especially for Pierre Poilievre, who is very used to and very comfortable in the role of opposing the government, which is the job of the official opposition, but now has to learn how to also oppose Donald Trump and show that a conservative party, a conservative government potentially, and him as prime minister, if he were to win, can stand up to Donald Trump. Because even though he wanted it, and for more than a year now has been asking for a carbon tax election, I think most people don't expect that to be the ballot box issue when we do finally go to vote.
Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman, live in Ottawa.